Welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you for joining me. So, riddle me this. I wonder if anybody has actually kept track. Under the Trump administration, how many scandals did we have? Forget the years before, forget the lead up to the 2016 election, forget all of the years afterward where the media has continued to bang that drum. I'm talking about the specific 4 years that Trump was actually in office. How many scandals? And of course, by scandals, what I mean are hoaxes, rumors, conjecture, ridiculous nonsense that wasn't verified whatsoever, that ended up not being true, that ended up being debunked, but was peddled by the media as gospel for years. That was spoon-fed to voters as gospel for years. How many? There are listicles out there where you can actually go and you can look up the worst of them, but I think we actually lost track of how many times, how many hoaxes, how much fake news was churned out of the left-wing media machine in the 4 years under Donald Trump. That was a man that could not scratch his nose without it being some sort of a crime. And we saw it over and over and over again. It doesn't really matter what you think about Donald Trump. Doesn't really matter what you think about his presidency, what you think about him moving into 2024. That's not the point. What I'm talking about is the fact that there is no one with any intellectual honesty. There is no one whatsoever with any decency that could look back on the 4 years under Trump and say that it was anything other than an absolute media dumpster fire. And now the same media that spent 4 years squawking about protecting democracy, we have to make sure that voters are informed. We have to make sure that we speak truth to power. We have to make sure that we tell the truth, no matter what it costs. That same exact media that cared so much about democracy, cared so much about corruption, right, is the same exact media that has spent the last almost 3 years doing nothing but carrying water for the Biden family, protecting the Biden family. Doesn't matter how much evidence we have piling up in mountains bigger than Everest, suggesting an influence peddling scheme involving Joe Biden when he was vice president, his son Hunter Biden. Now we have other family members getting roped in here. Doesn't matter how much evidence we have that the man sitting in the Oval Office as president of the United States of America is one of the most corrupt politicians who may yet still be posing a national security risk himself by opening himself up to blackmail because of everything he was doing before. It doesn't matter how much evidence we have raising legitimate questions like this that need to be answered. The media is absolutely refusing to do its job. It is doing the exact opposite of what it did to Donald Trump. And it's doing so in an effort to influence voters in this country. And so what we're left with is a House Oversight Committee in Congress that is trying to dig through all of these details, that is trying to bring to light the things that have been hidden, the things that it was the media's job all along to ferret out. Investigative journalism in this country is dead. And it's bombshells like what we're seeing this week, which I think is probably one of the biggest ones to come out so far, that prove it. This one involves a Chinese Communist Party-linked company called CEFC and their affiliate, Northern International Capital, because remember, all Chinese companies are linked to and controlled by the CCP. This is what communism does. Doesn't matter what all of the morons on college campuses in this country want to tell you. Communism is not a basket of daisies. It is dictatorial. And it controls everything. And apparently Hunter Biden, according to the House Oversight Committee, was in bed with one of these companies. Of course, Joe Biden has previously claimed that Hunter Biden never did business with the Chinese. He made this claim on stage during a debate with Donald Trump.
Vice President Biden, there have been questions about the work your son has done in China and for a Ukrainian energy company when you were vice president. In retrospect, was anything about those relationships inappropriate or unethical?
Nothing was unethical. Here's what the deal. With regard to Ukraine, we had this whole question about whether or not, because he was on the board, I later learned of a Burisma, a company, that somehow I had done something wrong. Yet every single solitary person, when he was going through his impeachment, testifying under oath who worked for him, said, I did my job impeccably. I carried out U.S. policy. Not one single solitary thing was out of line. Not a single thing, number one. Number two, the guy who got in trouble in Ukraine was this guy trying to bribe the Ukrainian government to say something negative about me, which they would not do and did not do because it never, ever, ever happened. My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had, the only guy made money from China is this guy. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China.
President Trump, let me ask my question to you.
But could I just one thing?
Very quickly.
His son didn't have a job for a long time, was sadly no longer in the military service. I won't get into that. And he didn't have a job. As soon as he became vice president, Burisma, not the best reputation in the world. I hear they paid him $183,000 a month. Listen to this. $183,000, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment.
All right.
And he had no energy.
I'm going to let the vice president respond to that quickly, and then I need to get to a
dishonest.
question to you. Very
No
quickly,
basis for that. Everybody investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong.
Okay, that's fun. Of course, Joe Biden also claimed that he never did business with his son, never even discussed business with his son, never met anyone who was in business with his son. And we know now that those were all giant whopping lies. We're supposed to forget that those are things that he told us, right? We're supposed to forget that Joe Biden made all those claims now that there's proof that none of that was actually true.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
Do you stand by your statement that you did not discuss any of your son's overseas business dealings?
Yes, I stand by that statement.
The gaslighting has been strong with this one. So this new bombshell, this new allegation from the Oversight Committee claims that back in July of 2017, Joe Biden, who was less than a year out from his 8-year stint as Obama's VP, and Hunter Biden, who took 5 minutes away from the crack pipe and demanded a $10 million payment from a CEFC associate. So Hunter Biden doing business with this Chinese company, has some associates within this company. According to the House Oversight Committee, he began writing messages to CEFC demanding $10 million. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, by the way, says that they have these messages. According to Comer,
Hunter claimed he was sitting with his father and that the Biden network would turn on his associate if he didn't pony up the money.
that sounds like fun. Here's the actual message the committee says that Hunter sent to one Henry Zhao over with CEFC. I'm sitting here with my father, that would be Joe Biden, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. And Z, if I get a call or text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. Sounds a little bit like extortion to me. I feel like that's kind of the definition of it. So here we have messages that the House Oversight Committee says that they have of Hunter Biden demanding $10 million from CEFC. By the way, this message was first released over the summer. You may recall. This particular detail is not new. It was exposed by IRS whistleblowers who claimed that their investigations into Hunter Biden were being stymied by leadership, kind of like over at the DOJ, who've bent over backwards to help Biden's son, you know, where it's just dragging their feet to find anything that man may have possibly done. And when they do, when they finally have to do something about it, it's slapping him with some, you know, tax evasion and, you know, we'll just kind of, you know, there, bad boy. And then everything else kind of gets swept under the rug because after all, remember, this guy is a cokehead. He looks like he just came from a powdered donut festival on any given day. So, you know, we got to kind of, you know, you don't want to bash the drug addict, right? This is a recovering drug addict, so we can't criticize him, but so hard. Now, at the time that those messages came out over the summer, Hunter Biden's lawyer said that his client's words could not be trusted because, again, he was a drug addict when he sent them. Never mind what the cokehead says, right? Then another lawyer of Hunter Biden claimed that images of the messages being circulated online were fake. So he's a drug addict. Don't believe anything he says, right? Also, those pictures that you see are not real. For his part, Joe Biden got really belligerent, as he often does when he is asked questions that he doesn't like. He denied he was in the room at the time that his son purportedly sent these messages.
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved? Were you
I wasn't, and I don't know.
Were you?
No.
All right, typical Joe Biden, right? We're all dog-faced pony soldiers. Don't ask me questions I don't like. Now the House committee says that while they can't necessarily prove that Joe Biden was actually in the same room as Hunter at the time that he sent these extortion messages, they have found evidence that the payment itself did happen. And some of it did make its way to Joe Biden. Fancy that. Fancy that, a money trail. So Hunter Biden said he wanted money for his joint venture with CEFC. It was called Sino-Hawk Holdings, which you may recall also involved Hunter Biden's former business associate, one Tony Bobulinski, and which messages from 2017 show that Joe Biden was actually very much involved in. In fact, according to Fox News, quote, text messages obtained by Fox News Digital back in 2020 revealed that Joe Biden, in May of 2017, met with Hunter's business associates for the Sino-Hawk venture, specifically Tony Bobulinski. The meeting on May 2nd, 2017, would have taken place just 11 days before a May 13th email obtained by Fox News in 2020, which included a discussion of remuneration packages for 6 people in the business deal with CEFC. The email includes a note that, quote, Hunter has some office expectations he will elaborate, and a proposed equity split that references 20 for H and 10 held by H for the big guy, with no further details. Of course, there has been plenty of very credible speculation that the big guy referred to in these emails is, in fact, Joe Biden. Who else would it be? So remember, this is all happening right before Hunter Biden sends this message to CEFC demanding $10 million, right? This is happening in May. This email found on Hunter Biden's laptop purporting that Hunter Biden is wanting an equity split with CEFC, 20 for H and 10 held by H for the big guy. Now we've got about 2 months later. Hunter purportedly sends this message to CEFC asking where his payout is, right? We discussed this back in May. Where's my money? Zhu responded in a message, according to the House Oversight Committee, saying that, quote, CEFC is willing to cooperate with the family. Now, that was all in July. Here's where it gets even more fun. Buckle up.
First, Northern International Capital, a Chinese company associated with CEFC, wired $5 million to Hudson West 3, a joint venture established by Hunter Biden and a CEFC associate. Then Hudson West 3 sent $400,000 to an entity owned and controlled by Hunter Biden.
So we've got $5 million going to Hudson West 3, $400,000 of which is sent to an entity that is owned and controlled solely by Hunter Biden. The number of shell companies and ventures this guy was involved in, frankly, it's a wonder he had time to make illegitimate love children to abandon.
Next, Hunter Biden wired $150,000 to Lion Hall Group, a company owned by James and Sarah Biden.
Why? Oh, kicks and giggles. I'm sure early Christmas present, go buy yourself a nice Ferrari on me.
Sarah Biden then withdrew $50,000 in cash from Lion Hall Group. Later the same day, she deposited it into her and James Biden's personal checking account. A few days later, Sarah Biden cut a check to Joe Biden for $40,000. The memo line of the check said loan repayment.
$40,000 to Joe Biden, which just happens to be 10% of what Hunter Biden deposited into his own company. Remember that 10% for the big guy? Interesting. Coincidence? The email that included that thinly veiled message of 10% for the big guy happened to be about the same company, CEFC, just 2 months before this river of cash started flowing all the way to Joe Biden. So there are a couple of key takeaways from this absolutely insane story. The fact that Hunter Biden told this Chinese company, first of all, that he was sitting with his father and that Joe Biden was part of the plan to extort money from this company or threatening repercussions. Even if Biden wasn't actually there at the time, Hunter Biden clearly felt very comfortable leveraging his father's name as part of the deal, and this company clearly recognized Joe Biden's involvement enough to be worried about that. The fact that the name was even dropped, regardless of whether Joe Biden was actually sitting there at the time, which again would be a massive revelation, but there's probably no way that we're ever going to know for sure unless there was a camera in the room, which shocking. I'm fairly certain there probably wasn't. But the fact that Hunter Biden even felt comfortable enough saying, my dad is right here and he wants to know where our money is, and you had better send it or there's going to be hell to pay, and he's going to help make sure of it. The second key takeaway is the fact that this money was immediately filtered through multiple shell companies into bank accounts of multiple Biden family members and ultimately to Joe Biden himself. Why? What in the world did James and Sarah Biden have to do with anything? Why in the world was Hunter Biden funneling almost $200,000 in cash to them that they were then immediately taking out and handing over to Joe Biden? If this was not another bank account to funnel the cash through, if this was another cog in the convoluted machine of making sure that money was very, very difficult to trace. Even if Joe Biden had loaned money to his brother James, even if there was a loan to be repaid and this $40,000 check was some form of repayment for that loan, the only reason that James Biden even had the money in the first place was because Joe Biden, per his own son Hunter's claim, was using his influence to get the Chinese company to pay out in the first place. According to Hunter Biden, and the messages that he was purportedly sending that the House Oversight Committee says they have, Joe Biden, or at least his name and his influence, was part of the beginning of this whole thing that ended up landing money in James Biden's bank account for him to turn around and repay the loan. I'm using air quotes here, repay the loan to Joe. And by the way, through all of the steps in this process, somebody's making money, right? It's not like this was a small amount that was given to Hunter Biden that was then given to James. They're all making money. $400,000 to Hunter Biden, and then $100,000 to James and Sarah's company, and then $50,000 to James and Sarah, $40,000 of which goes to Joe Biden. There's money being siphoned off at every step here. Not only does this suggest a corrupt influence peddling scheme involving the Biden family again, including Joe Biden again, if true, this also means that the President of the United States opened himself up to the risk of blackmail by countries who paid millions of dollars to his family, including countries that absolutely hate us. This is a huge vulnerability and a national security risk for the United States, particularly from companies like China. If you have people who know that you were part of an influence peddling scheme and that you and your family got rich off of it, that opens you up to a slew of blackmail risks, particularly if you care at all about keeping your power, which Joe Biden does. These are legitimate questions. This isn't just curiosity. This isn't just, well, maybe you don't like Joe Biden and you're just trying to find something. No. This is very serious stuff with very serious implications if true. What also might be corrupt, or at least absolute garbage, is how your health insurance company is spending your money every single year. Millions of Americans like you pay huge premiums for coverage that you don't need or use, only for your hard-earned dollars to go to subsidize medical costs for others that you don't want to pay for, like abortions or chemical castrations for minors. And if you live in a blue state, the chances of that are even higher. And that's why you need to check out Share Healthcare. I'm partnering with Share Healthcare to let you know about their affordable, cost-saving alternative to traditional health insurance. Share Healthcare is a cost-sharing program between people of shared faith and values who simply want to get the coverage they need without paying for medical procedures that violate their beliefs. And with plans that start as low as $149 a month, saving money and keeping a clear conscience never got easier. So don't waste another minute or another dime paying for someone else's abortion or gender surgery. Go to sharehealthcare.com. Enter the referral code MRCTV23, that's sharehealthcare.com, MRCTV23, and start saving money today. By the way, all of this stuff that came out this week, all of this insanity, this isn't even close to the first time something like this has happened. We know Biden met with Hunter Biden's business associates on multiple occasions. We already know that, including in the White House, despite claiming that he was never involved in his son's business deals, never met with any of his son's business partners. We already know that Hunter Biden repeatedly dropped Joe Biden's name in meetings, even called his dad during business meetings and put him on speakerphone. Why else would you do that? Just figured we'd chat about the weather right here in the middle of a business meeting, and we're supposed to actually buy that line. We know the Biden family received payouts from multiple companies in multiple foreign countries, and that money was distributed among Biden family members, including grandkids who were children. This latest allegation comes just a week after Congressman James Comer said that the House Oversight Committee also found evidence of an influence peddling scheme involving Joe Biden's brother. James, this one is almost as fun. So just 2 weeks ago, Comer revealed that the committee had uncovered evidence of a $200,000 check that Biden received from his brother for, again, a personal loan repayment. This was back in 2018, 2 years after Biden had left office as vice president, and 1 year after this whole CEFC scandal purportedly went down. At the time, Comer says that James Biden and his wife Sarah had on the very same day received $200,000 from a company called AmeriCorps. This was a financially floundering rural hospital operating company. James and Sarah Biden ultimately received a total of $600,000 in loans from the company. Comer said, quote, according to bankruptcy court documents, the company ultimately declared bankruptcy in 2019, James Biden received these loans based upon representations that his last name, Biden, could open doors, and that he could obtain a large investment from the Middle East based on his political connections. Har, har, har. Political connections. Wonder who that could possibly be. So according to the committee's findings, AmeriCorps wired $200,000 to James and Sarah Biden's personal bank account on March 1st, 2018, their personal bank account, not their company. This wasn't for where this is a personal bank account. That very same day, James wrote a $200,000 check to his brother, Joe Biden, from the same exact bank account for what was listed in the memo line at the time as loan repayment. And we're supposed to believe that was a coincidence. Here you have the brother of the former vice president, whose political aspirations were not done, by the way. You have the brother of the former vice president telling this failing company, this company that is in need of an influx of cash, my last name's Biden. And if you give me money, I'm fairly certain that I can use my last name and my political connections to leverage an investment from the Middle East to help you out. And next thing you know, here's this company forking over $200,000 that immediately on the same day gets funneled right to Joe Biden for a loan repayment. Comer says that in total, the House Oversight Committee has learned through its investigation that the Biden family and their business associates brought in more than $24 million between 2014 and 2019 by selling Joe Biden as the brand around the world. So now we have multiple separate instances of Biden family members extorting money out of companies under the claim that the Biden name carries weight. We have multiple instances of Hunter Biden dropping his dad's name in conversations with business partners to seal deals. So let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. We're supposed to forget that Joe Biden said that he had never been involved in his son's business dealings, never talked about it with his son, never met with his associates, all of which has been proven to be a lie, not just an alleged lie, but actually proven. It's even been admitted by the left-wing media that spent years pretending otherwise until they just couldn't anymore because the evidence was so big. We were supposed to forget all about those lies immediately. Remember this one, published by the New York Times on August 1st of this year. It has long been known that the elder Mr. Biden at times interacted with his son's business partners. Has it? Really? Maybe for those of us that have been paying attention, but the media spent years telling us otherwise because Joe Biden spent years telling us otherwise. And we're supposed to believe everything that comes out of that man's mouth, and the media never actually fact checks, never actually verifies. That hadn't been long known. At least it hadn't been long admitted. Never mind all of the lies. The evidence changed, so the narrative must change. And so now we're supposed to accept that. It was perfectly normal for Biden to be on speakerphone with his son Hunter Biden's business partners and to meet with them in the White House when he was vice president. All of that was totally okay. He was probably just talking about his grandkids, like Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton sitting on a tarmac. Nothing to see here. And now in that same vein, we're supposed to believe that multiple Biden family members had lucrative multi-million-dollar deals with floundering companies and overseas businesses and corrupt government-tied enterprises, that millions of dollars were being wired to Biden family members for jobs that we still don't have many answers about. We still don't know how in the world Hunter Biden was at all useful to these businesses, much less to the tune of millions of dollars, given that half the time he spent buried under a pile of hookers and blow. Now we have James Biden promising that his last name will open doors for investments out of the Middle East to help failing hospital operators. Why? Probably not him making the Biden name famous. What political connections could he possibly have been peddling? Oh, and by the way, all of this money is flowing into these people's bank accounts through multiple shell companies, which you totally do when things are on the up and up. Some of it just happens to be making its way into Joe Biden's bank account. Because even though these people were rich in their own right, we're supposed to believe he had loaned them money and they were just paying him back, right? We have Biden family members on record admitting they were using the Biden name to extort payouts and then happened to at least partially land them in Joe Biden's bank account, and there's nothing to see here. Did we all just fall off the watermelon truck yesterday? Oh, and the fact that all of this was happening at the same time that he was vice president or shortly thereafter is just happenstance and weird timing. And leftists actually want us to believe, because so many of them are so stupid and gullible that they believe it themselves, that this was genuinely just a brother repaying a multi-$100,000 loan. Like, I don't know, what was James Biden going to write, corrupt money from all that name dropping in the memo line? Thanks for the help, Veep. Couldn't have bought the yacht without you. Ask Barack if he wants in on it next time. I don't know. China sends their love. XOXO. What was he supposed to write in the memo line? That's like saying, another body washed up on the Jersey Shore, riddled with holes like Swiss cheese. Mob boss says he was just out fishing. Jewelry store robbed the other day. Guy walking away in a ski mask. Pockets overflowing with gold chain, says he was just out for a stroll. Nothing to see here. No evidence. We're actually supposed to buy this. There's a pretty old adage that says that if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably not a buffalo. Still interesting. Again, same exact media that ran with things like the Steele dossier, which was absolute bunk. And anybody with eyes could see it from the get-go. And how many times do we have to hear it over and over and over again? The media had no problem chasing every single rumor. Every single shred of conjecture that could be about Trump or Russian collusion. Interesting that they still cannot seem to bother putting a reporter or two on this Biden story, which shows the absolute state of the media in this country and the fact that the American voter cannot trust them for information, cannot rely on them for facts, to be honest in their reporting, to inform the voters, to make an informed choice when they go to the polls. We saw this. We saw this back in 2020. We know that important information that would have mattered to the voters prior to the 2020 election was manipulated and intentionally censored by the media and by social media companies, to the point where Americans did not even know about the infamous Hunter Biden laptop, which polling by us at the Media Research Center showed had a massive influence on the presidential election. We know that now. Censoring stories like this, not reporting stories like this, not investigating corruption by Democrat politicians because the leftist media is too busy carrying water for them. Depriving the American people of information has a tangible effect on elections and the future of this country. If you really cared about preserving democracy, if you really cared about election integrity, which of course the left doesn't, but they say all day long that they do, and this just proves it. If you actually cared about all of that, then you would be leaving no stone unturned in the face of mounting piles of evidence that we have a corrupt president who spent years getting rich and making his family rich off of the elected position that he held, that he was entrusted with, to the point of potentially putting himself in a dangerous position as the supposed leader of the free world and leaving this country vulnerable because God only knows whose back pocket he's landed himself in. Which brings me to my second point, and that is the Republicans who keep releasing this stuff, by the way. We have more than enough evidence at this point of an influence peddling scheme by Joe Biden and his family members. We have more than enough evidence to justify a legitimate investigation into corruption by the President of the United States. We have more than enough evidence of dangerous ties between the top elected leader of this country and nations that hate us and mean to do us harm. It's great for this information to come out. It's great for the American public to be made aware of these findings. But this is not a problem that is solved, case closed. Putting out a tweet thread on the House Republicans account over on Twitter or X or whatever does not solve this problem. And I am so tired of Republicans waving around these reports and saying, looky what we found, and then nothing at all happens. Because posting a video saying that you found evidence of this stuff does not equal accountability. It's a nice first step in transparency for the American people to the extent that they will learn about it, because God knows the left-wing media is not going to report on this. And they certainly are not going to investigate this deeper. There will be a select few number of people who even hear this story. And it will continue to be an exercise in futility and frustration. How many times did we see piles of evidence just like this about corruption in the Clinton family? How many times? How many times were those two yahoos caught dead to rights doing some really sketchy stuff that everybody knew was not above board? How many times were serious questions raised about sketchy donations to the Clinton Foundation when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State? How many times? I mean, this was a woman that was caught red-handed with classified documents in her home on a private server and nothing. And you know, I think that part of what the media counts on, part of what the left counts on is that these are not the sexiest stories, right? These are not easily digestible stories. It takes a minute to actually work through the details of these stories, and our attention span tends to be very, very short. Part of funneling all of this money through shell companies and different people's bank accounts is not just because it makes the money harder to trace and to track. It's because when you start making things that convoluted, you lose people's ability to follow. You lose their attention span. And I think that's what the media is counting on here. Same exact thing like what we saw with the Clintons, right? Never mind all of this sketchy stuff with the Chinese. There's a stain on a blue dress and everybody's attention goes, what? And then all of the really legitimate stuff, all of the actual corruption, all of the real dirt just sort of gets swept under the rug, right? Interesting. It's always, oh well, at least when it's a Democrat. I have no problem whatsoever with the media holding Republicans accountable, none whatsoever. You find a Republican involved in corruption, which Lord knows they have been. You find a Republican lawmaker or a lawmaker of any party, I don't care, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever. If you find someone running for office or holding office in this country mired in corruption, in criminal behavior, absolutely hold them accountable. But the media is not doing that with both sides equally. Years under Trump, years peddling every single hoax that ended up being debunked. And we can't even get legitimate questions looked into about Joe Biden. Tells you all you need to know about the state of the media and tells you all you need to know about the direction that we're heading in 2024. Rigging ballot boxes is not the only way that you influence an election. We saw it in 2020. And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys back here next Thursday. In the meantime, make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show, and that way you will never miss an episode. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That one's with Tim Graham. I'll see you guys back here next Thursday. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. God bless.